after dinner when I'm filming this, I'll come and read in the chair for a bit, and I think I've conditioned the cat. Yeah, let me put this down for you. I can't believe that worked. Hi there, and welcome to the October wrap-up, which is so weird to say. I've lost all sense of time. I also realized that we always film these on the floor now. I don't know when that happened, but I was considering filming it in other places and it just felt wrong. But apparently my decision paid off due to the cuteness behind me. October was a very strange month because I felt like I read very little, but I ended up reading 10 books, which is still really good, but I'm about 1,000 pages under what I read last month. But I was still really impressed with the amount that I was able to read considering how busy my month was. And also I went back and made a list of all of the TV shows and movies that we watched this month that were all like highly acclaimed and everyone was talking about them, and it's a lot. So really reading anything in a month where all I wanted to do was watch TV is pretty impressive. This month I watched Squid Game, I watched You, season 3 came out, Lula Rich was amazing, Only Murders in the Building, Drag Race Canada and UK both started, and then also brand new Dune came out, and then backlist for Halloween we decided to watch I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which was absolutely incredible, and I would recommend watching the movie because I think reading the book would be a nightmare. It is very difficult to tell what's going on in that, and I feel like reading it would be such a slog, though now that I've seen it, I do really want to read it. So if you're looking for any TV suggestions, I highly recommend all of those. You know, a lot of them have content warnings. A lot of them are quite graphic, but really incredible stuff. Like, you know how they had the golden age of television like 10 years ago? Screw that. We're in it October 2021. But if you want some book recommendations, I have those for you too. The first book that I read this month was Every Last Fear by Alex Finlay, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I was not expecting it. I mean, I kind of was because it had been on my TBR for so long and I was just sort of drawn to it, but I couldn't tell why. All I knew about it was the opening line is they found the bodies on a Tuesday. But it's such an interesting thriller that has so many POVs and so much stuff going on that you're always engaged on some level. There are 3 crimes going on basically. There's a family found dead in Mexico. There is a corporate embezzlement financial crimes thing. And then there is a character who was part of making a murderer. Basically, this universe is making a murderer, the brother of the family that was killed, is in prison for something people don't believe he's committed, and there's been a whole documentary and stuff around it, which is really interesting. Am I clear on the ending? Not as much as I would like to be. I don't know if he's written anything else, but I will definitely be looking for what he has done in the future. Another recommendation, Life's Too Short by Jimenez. I read this for BuzzFeed Picks Which Romance I Read, and it was really, really fun. The whole video turned out really well too, if you're interested in my full thoughts. But I thought this was a super interesting premise and sort of solidified something that I really like in books, which is people who have sworn off dating and just sort of being drawn inevitably to people. That's something this book did really well. Lots of family stuff in it too, which is kind of hit or miss for me in a romance, but this one was definitely a hit. I don't know if I'm going to read any of her other stuff because I've heard very mixed to negative things about them, but this one I thought was really good. Next, I want to talk about Cultish by Montell. There's also a whole video for this where I give you cult book recommendations, but this is a nonfiction book about the language of fanaticism, though it's more of an overview of cults in general, what defines them, differentiates them, and then a whole history of cults through the years. And it was super engaging. I really enjoyed being able to read this physically. If you're looking for a nonfiction kickoff, highly recommend this one. I do wish this went into the language aspect a little bit more. The stuff that it did do was really interesting and really well done. I just wish there was more of that. Then I read 3 books for a vlog that never happened. it wasn't working out with my life at the time. The whole idea is, in my preparation for the Goodreads Choice Awards, YA is separated into fantasy and non-fantasy. So I had 3 non-fantasy picks that I read. The first one, Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon, was a real disappointment for me. This is about a girl who can see all of the phases of a couple's relationship when they kiss in front of her. And I thought that was such an interesting premise, and so there's so much you can do with that, but it never really followed through on the promise and became just sort of a generic YA romance that I really didn't care for. I'm trying to think of more to say about it, but it's just such a thin story. There's not really much there. Like, think of a YA contemporary romance and yep, that's what happens. I give 3 stars. Then I read Ace of Spades by Farida, Abeke, and Messe, and this one is sort of the opposite of the last one, where like the thrillery part of it, the whole Ace of Spades bit, wasn't the part that I cared about the most. It was just the regular contemporary stuff about the kids living their lives, their relationships with their friends and their family. I thought that was just so interesting, and the actual mystery of Ace of Spades got really convoluted. I totally understand what the book was going for, and there were super strong bits in it. I just think it didn't quite come together. This is a story about 2 students at an elite private school who are getting blackmailed. And it's described as Gossip Girl meets Get Out, which is an extremely accurate assessment, possibly too accurate. Doesn't leave much mystery there, but I could see so much in the writing that I really enjoyed and in the story overall. Just little nitpicky things, especially in a thriller, where if you don't enjoy the thrust of the mystery, then it's not going to pay off as well as you want it to. 4 stars for that one. I hope that I remain as positive about my feelings about it in my memory, because I worry that, like, when you think of Ace of Spades, you're going to think of the blackmailing part, which was not the interesting part to me. So if I ever speak badly of this book in the future, it's just my memory playing tricks with me. And then the last book that I read for that was Tokyo Ever After by Emiko, the worst of the bunch. This was described as Princess Diaries in Japan, and it is that, but without any of the charm. When there's a found princess story like this, I feel like your character has to do at least one of 2 things, maybe both. They have to be really socially awkward and uncomfortable and embarrass themselves constantly in like a fun, comedic way. Or they have to be super politically minded and trying to undermine the current system, or, you know, track down a baddie in the family, go out of their way to interact with the public more in a way that pisses off their family, like intentionally. There has to be some kind of conflict there. But this didn't have either of those, so there was virtually no conflict. She's a little confused sometimes, but she's pretty sure of herself, and she doesn't really have any political aspirations. She doesn't consider leaving all that seriously. She's pretty passive, and that's just not an interesting story. There also ends up being quite a bit of romance in here that I didn't like. I thought it took some really weird turns and was really unnecessary in a book that is supposed to be about a daughter connecting with her father. I felt like it distracted from the point of that. 2 stars for this one. Sad about it. Next, I read The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. This is a horror novel about a woman who is cleaning out her grandmother's home after she has passed away, and her grandmother was a hoarder. And then mysterious things start happening. There's a hill in the backyard that shouldn't exist. There are creepy noises at night, and it really sold me on that part. I think the opening of this was really strong, trying to figure out the mystery with her grandfather and meeting all of the town people. There was some good spooky stuff in here. I also really liked, she has a dog who is really fun in the story, but it opens up with her saying, like, the dog and I made it out of there okay. So if you're worried about dog death, I might have the book for you because he is in danger at points, but you know he's gonna come out fine. But I felt like it slowly went downhill for 2 reasons. One a me reason and one a book reason. For the book, I feel like it's just really hard to maintain tension in a horror novel. Like, something scary has to happen and then you kind of have to back off. And the characters will just live their lives for a little while with a little simmering tension underneath. And then something else will happen and then you back off. But the story never really builds. It's just kind of the same thing happening over and over again until the ending. Like, she's cleaning up a house, she sees something creepy, she runs away temporarily and then psychs herself up to go back, keeps cleaning, sees something scary, and that just kind of happens until the big ending happened, which I really, really disliked. It takes a totally different direction, a direction I could imagine a lot of people liking, but definitely not something for me. I think especially as a non-fantasy reader, it is hard for me to get on board with supernatural stuff, and like in a horror, there's gonna be some supernatural stuff happening, but it went even more fantasy than I was expecting. So with all of that considered, I settled to a 3-star, but I did really like the writing, and her other book, The Hollow Ones, I believe. That is one that I'm still really interested in, so hopefully that will be more my speed, but I'm wondering if horror just really isn't for me and thriller is more the avenue I want to go down. Next, I read The Heart Principle by Helen Wang. There's a whole video for this. It was super fun. I'm actually really proud of the video, so take a look at that for my full thoughts. This is the 3rd in the Kiss Quotient series. This follows Anna, a violinist, and Kwan, who is running a clothing business with his cousin Michael from the first book. It's interconnected, but you don't have to read one to understand the others. It's just little nods in there. And this one was super good. I think my problem with this one is that I stopped reading it at part 2, which is when something bad happens and it affects the whole rest of the story. And the first part and the second part are so very different that they feel like 2 different books. So the first part has most of the romance in it, which is adorable and so well done, and I really loved it. And then the second part is much more Anna's story, where she's dealing with her family who suck and I hate them, and it's much less of a lighthearted story after that. So it is tough to read at some points, but it also didn't emotionally destroy me as much as I was expecting it to. Definitely still cried, but it was just a very different story. And I'm so excited to see what this author is going to do next. I have no idea now. Like, we've been waiting for this book for 2 years, and now what's she gonna do? I will buy it. I will buy it. This is also a signed copy, so I will buy it. I was so excited about this book, but I knew I had to hold off and read my signed copy. So this book came out in August, I'm pretty sure, so I had to wait even longer than most people. But it was still worth it, and I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I have some things to say. This book was bad. I absolutely don't think you should waste your time on this. It was such a letdown for sci-fis. Okay, so this is about Clara, who is an artificial friend. She's a robot who's made to, like, be a companion for a kid. And we learn a bit about how the world works, all the different models of robots, what they can do. And then after a while, Clara meets her kid, Josie, and goes to live with her. And there's some interesting stuff presented from the robot side of things, but it is so strange to read a story about an AI where it is never questioned whether the AI has a soul. It is always assumed that Clara does not have a soul, that she's just a tool, that they can do whatever they want, and she also feels that way. Like, she has no sense that there is anything more to her than her programming, and I don't understand why you would do that. That just feels like such a missed opportunity, and especially when they're talking about what makes a human soul. they talk extensively about that, but it's never brought up whether Clara is a person. And I found that so incredibly frustrating. The world building in this is also extremely soft, like unbearably soft. I never had a sense of where we were in the world. We could have been anywhere. Maybe that's the point, but it felt like the world building wasn't intentionally vague. It felt lazy and like the author didn't know the answers to questions he was posing. There are so many plot lines that are picked up and don't really go anywhere. There's a bunch of stuff with the neighbor kid and stuff with Josie's parents. Like, there's a lot to work with there, but nothing ever happened. Clara also believes basically that the sun is her friend and that it has special powers, and she sort of prays to it like a god. And the book sort of validates that, which I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why the book was doing anything that it was doing. It just felt like it was so long for nothing happening, and it was so repetitive, and the ending was extremely unsatisfying. And the entire time I kept thinking, this is just a bad version of Today I Am Carrie, because this is almost exactly the same setup. Carrie is a medical robot, but he goes to live with a family and makes a special relationship with the kid there, and they like grow and become friends, and it's the same. But this is so much better. And I kept thinking, Clara and the Sun has to get there, because look at what this book did. Like, it's right there. It's gonna take a turn at any minute, and I'm gonna feel the same way about it that I do Today I'm Carrie. But I never did. And in the end, I like regret reading it. I feel like it was a waste of my time. So this is recommendation number 5,000 on this channel. If you have any interest in Clara and the Sun, or robots, or science fiction, or joy, don't read Clara and the Sun. Read Today I Am Carrie by Martin L. Schumacher. And then the final book that I finished this month was Frank Herbert's Dune, a graphic novel by a bunch of people who aren't Frank Herbert. This is just a graphic novel of Dune. I did get it confirmed that this is the first half of the first book. So there is a second part of this coming out. It says in here, spring 2022. So I'm gonna pick it up, which is kind of surprising for me because I don't really know what happened in this book. It's extremely confusing. Your hand is not held at all. There's a lot of just terms for stuff that are never explained. There's a lot of political machinations where people get backstabbed and then the backstabbers get backstabbed, and it's confusing, but I had a good time. The art was very much my speed, and I was able to go through it in one sitting. Graphic novels are never really my thing, but I ended up really enjoying it, and I think it was super beneficial for me before seeing the movie, because the movie is also confusing and a lot of things aren't explained, and you also can't like tell what they're saying when they're not using English terms. There's a lot of which terms for stuff, it's unclear. But because I had read it, I already sort of had an inclination of what was gonna happen. Not the full thing. Both this and the movie seem to take different bits from the original book and whatever served their purpose to form the story that they were hoping to tell. But I was actually really disappointed in the movie. There were two scenes in here that were my favorite that they didn't use in the movie. The first one is Lady Jessica finding this greenhouse, and I just thought this was such an interesting visual that I was really excited to see the movie do it, and then the movie didn't do it. And then they had a whole dinner party where they were discussing water customs. Not sure if there's a lot to see here, but there's a little bit about how the guests have like a washing bin to wash their hands when they come in, and about how wasteful that is, and Leto trying to potentially change stuff. I just think like the water discussions on a desert planet should be so interesting, and they did a little bit of that in the movie, but not quite the scene that I wanted. I'm gonna give this 3 stars just because I don't know what else I would rate it. I had a good time, but I was confused. 3 stars feels appropriate for that. Those are the 10 books that I read in October. Some really good ones in here, but I think mostly it was like surprise disappointments. But now we're on to November and reading all of the Goodreads Choice nominees. It's going to be a wild month. I'm going to try to be really diligent with my reading. It's going to go really well. I'm going to cuddle this guy a lot. He's going to hate me eventually. Thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!